Right, so our next unit in Pixar in a Box, our animation stuff, is simulation, and this one is called Hair Simulation 101. And they're going to explain kind of how they had to approach the movement and stuff of the hair of the main character in Brave. So watch a couple of these videos here, short videos, go through some of the questions, and actually there's that activity. Couple videos, another activity, one video, another activity. So we'll have all three of those as part of the project that's on Google Classroom. So here we go with video number 1.
Hi, I'm Haley Ivan. I'm a software engineer at Pixar. I worked on the hair simulator for the movie Brave. Hair was a really big deal in Brave. It was a symbol of freedom that was intrinsic to our main character, Merida's personality. And making hair that feels right, meaning messy, wild, and free, is a hard thing to do computationally. In our movies, hair is a simulated effect. That means no one animates its movement by hand. The way it moves is defined by physics and programmed into the computer. To figure out what hair simulation should look like, we needed to look at real curly hair and see how it worked. What we found was this. Curly hair forms together in locks that reshape themselves when you pull on them, kind of like a spring. This was great news because springs can be modeled mathematically, meaning we can simulate their behavior using a computer program. From the computer's perspective, Merida's hair is just lots and lots of springs that react to forces, such as gravity, as Merida moves. The tests we ran using this approach were pretty good, but not quite natural enough. While stiffer springs held the shape of the curl, it didn't bounce like natural curls. When we made the springs looser, her curls would unwind when she moved. This was even more obvious at high, often unrealistic speeds found in animation. We realized we needed something to preserve the structure of the curl, but not impede the overall motion of the hair. Kind of like digital hairspray. Sorry. We came up with the idea of connecting the springs that make up Merida's on-screen hair to invisible core springs, like this. The core springs would limit the movement of the on-screen hair when the motion was more extreme. This way we could have the best of both worlds. Our original simulation would create motion that was soft and natural, but the core springs would keep the curl from unwinding too much. Figuring out how to make a hair simulation system that could help us achieve the feeling we wanted for Merida's hair was hard. It took a lot of iterations to get it right. But it made a big difference. Merida feels like a real girl. Messy, wild, and free. We actually do a lot of simulation at Pixar. Things like fire, water, and explosions are handled by the effects department. You can learn more about that in the effects lesson. The simulation department, who I work with, handles any motion attached to the characters at Pixar, like clothing and hair. But we can't move every hair on a Pixar character's head by hand. That would drive our animators crazy. Instead, we use physics and computer programming. In this lesson, you'll learn how to simulate hair the same way we did for Merida in the movie Brave. Here's an example of a shot of Merida that the simulation department got from the animation department on the film Brave. The animators have created the main action in the scene, and now it's our job to fill in the missing details, such as the motion of cloth and hair. Everything we do begins with modeling the problem we want to solve. In this case, we need a physical model of Merida's curly hair. So let's begin with the very basics. What should our model of hair look like? Well, hair is kinda like a mop, just a bunch of strings. But strings are actually quite complex to model mathematically because they are so bendy. Modeling them requires a lot of computational power due to all the calculations involved. This is why we are always looking for ways to simplify our models. For example, we could take a bunch of paper clips to model a strand of hair. We first draw a series of line segments connected to particles like this. The computer needs to calculate the positions of these particles, but first we need to describe what forces are acting on them. In the real world, each particle is affected by 3 forces: the force of gravity and the forces from neighboring connections, like this. Next up, I have an interactive program for you to see this in action. You can adjust the following parameters: size of each segment, number of segments per hair, number of hairs, and the force of gravity. Explore these parameters to see what kinds of looks you can come up with. Have fun.
Okay, so according to those videos, even the detail of someone's hair in one of these animated pictures is, it can be kind of complicated, but we're going to start out with kind of simple. And they talked about springs with hair and rope and making it look like a mop and different models that they use to make it look realistic. So this is just a way for you to kind of experiment with that. If you use your mouse, you can kind of drag and drop and see what the hair looks like. You can see it doesn't look very realistic yet, but we're going to use these sliders here to make it look a little more realistic, and by the time we get to this third one, it'll look pretty darn close. So again, you want your before picture, so you want to do your screenshot, whatever tool you use. Most of you might be using the snipping tool. If you took my advice in an earlier video, you got Light Shot for your Chrome, which is kind of a more advanced screenshot thing. So you'll do your before pictures so I can see what these were before you made your changes, and you'll play around with it. So this one is number of hairs, so obviously you're going to have a fuller head of hair if you go up to 200, so you can mess with that. And then segments per hair, so it could be really short, just one segment, or 2 segments, all the way up to 10 segments of hair. And then segment length, so if I were to do one segment, and the segment length could be all the way to 100, but it's only one segment of hair, so you can see it doesn't move very well. If I were to change that to maybe 3 segments per hair, and the segment length was 100, it moves a little better, but still not very natural. So that's something that you could change right there. And then gravity is going to make a difference. So right there, kind of looks like a spider. And then if you adjust the gravity, that's not very realistic because someone's hair wouldn't move for that long. So that's like maybe if you're on the moon or something, so it gets a little crazy. So have fun with it. And then once you've decided on the sliders where you think it looks the most realistic, then that's where you're going to give me an after shot. So again, we'll go do a screenshot, and you'll get me an after, and you'll turn that into the assignment. So now what we'll do is move on in a second tutorial for the second exercise, which will be spring mass system, and that'll be next.